Hello, this is Pavel from DevOps Codes Academy. Welcome to another episode. Today we're gonna learn about Terraform. We will provision S3 bucket in AWS Cloud using Terraform infrastructure as a code tool. So we will configure it locally on our machine and write a simple code to provision S3 bucket. Let's go to the browser.
Okay, we are in AWS console. So we're gonna first create quickly EC2 instance, Ubuntu. I want to show you just an example how to install Terraform on any machine. If you want to install it, and I would recommend you to install it locally on your computer. Depends on if you have Windows, MacBook. On Windows, you can use WSL Ubuntu distribution. I would recommend you to do that. On MacBook, it might be also possible to install Terraform. So I just want to show you, because I have already installed Terraform on my MacBook. Okay. So in this case, we're gonna just go through the documentation. This is the website, www.terraform.io. And we can see in download, right? And you can choose which platform you want to download. So on MacBook, you can use Brew to install Terraform. I hope you're familiar with Brew. If not, you can also find on Google how to install it. It's a very good package manager. On Windows, there are binaries to download, and also on Linux, and depends on the distribution. So let's see if our EC2 instance is already running. Okay, we are here. So let's copy this commands and try to get should we have duplicate here? We have good. LSP release not installed. Okay. So let's see. apt update. Looks like I chose Amazon. All right, so if I'm on Amazon, that's also an option. So we can use a different commands to install it, right? Okay, nobody's perfect. Typos, mistakes, they happen all the time. Okay, we have the repo, and let's install Terraform here. It doesn't matter from Terraform perspective which kind of operation system we are using. It's just a matter how we install it. Later on, it's just Terraform and it works. Terraform-h, and we see that it's working. That's very nice. All right. pwd, we are in our EC2 user. Let's create a folder Terraform. Go inside. Okay, so we have it done. So Terraform allows us to build infrastructure in the cloud in multiple clouds with different vendors. You can jump in and take a look about it. But what we are interested into the AWS provider, right? So we are using the open source. There's the documentation here about the CLI, about providers, how to use providers, and we're gonna find provider AWS. Here. find it here. Let's go back, overview, view tutorials. We can start here with tutorial from AWS. You can also check here, there are some video tutorials as well. So yes, we will need our AWS key and access key, that's for sure. We're gonna make it in a way in a moment, but what I was looking for, it's this part. So we need to define for Terraform our providers, and this is AWS provider from HashiCorp. This is the company providing Terraform. The version of it, we want to specify which version we want to use. We can also require the version of Terraform, right? Because there are some changes in different versions. And we can define the AWS provider, and we have to point out which region of AWS we want to use. And you can see here is AWS instance, but we're gonna go into the documentation and we're gonna find how to create S3 bucket instances instead of in situ. Okay, so we can also, not sure if we have nano here. We have it. All right, so we can copy the files. We can leave it as it is right now. The region, maybe I can change from US. Can do EU central one. This is Frankfurt. Doesn't matter because it's only a lesson. Control X, Y for save, enter. Okay, let's do Terraform init. Okay, Terraform has been successfully initialized, and there are some files after this command. You will see that appeared .terraform. This is the directory where Terraform will be downloading all the modules and provider and some other stuffs used for this project. And also there's a .terraform log HCL. This is also a file to show about the versions which we are using. But just to let you know at this moment. Okay, so now we can either go and continue editing our main file, but also we can create another file, and it doesn't matter how we're gonna name these files. It's a good practice to name them according to the functionality. So let's say if we want to keep all S3 buckets in one file, s3.tf, that's good practice. I also met practices that, let's say we want to configure load balancer and we want to put all of the stuff related to this load balancer also to one file, right? So from Terraform perspective, it's only important to remember that these files, they have to have the extension .tf. All right, so we are in Nano. So let's go to Google. The way how I do it, it's always Terraform AWS S3 bucket. That's how I look for the documentation. You can see it's here, AWS S3 bucket. We can see the version of the provider, and you have to be careful here. If you are working with the project that might have an older provider, you might have to change it here to the different version, right? Because the previous version might not have all the functionality that the newest one have, and then you might have an error. Okay, so always when you go to the documentation about the resources, you will have some example usage, and this is very good thing to work with. And you can always check some cases here, but if we go lower, there will be always argument reference. So these are the arguments that we have to provide or we can provide during provisioning. You can see if it's optional, it's not needed, right? Some of them, they are already deprecated and they will be removed in the future. So always take a look into the documentation. For now, we don't go for the deep details here. I'm gonna just provide a simple S3 bucket with website hosting. If we go lower, I just want to show you. There are also attributes. So this is something that this is an output from our resource, and we're gonna learn about it a little bit later. But when we create the S3 bucket and we want to refer it in a different resource, we can use this kind of output from the created resource. Also, if you have an S3 bucket which has been created manually, we can also import it to the Terraform code. And in my opinion, that's a very good feature because it allows us to sometimes do some proof of concept manually, and then we can import these resources into the code. No need to delete them and write the code from the scratch. And we will go through this kind of scenario as well. Okay, let's go to the top. Let's see some example usage. So we're gonna create an S3 bucket here. Let's go back to our instance. So the structure of the resource is always that first we're gonna call it resource, then we call it the provider resource, right? So this is taken from here, AWS S3 bucket, and there are different resources. And then we put a name of the resource, but this is not the name that will show in AWS console. This is something for Terraform to put an ID on this resource internally, right? So we cannot have in our one project two S3 buckets with the same ID, right? So if we would like to have another one, we would have to change it to number 2, or different one. We can call it by functionality. That's also a good practice. Here we have this attributes bucket equal my TF test bucket. So this is coming from the website where I showed you that we have this arguments, right? So we have to define it here. And if you remember from the last lesson, each bucket in AWS has to be unique, right? It cannot have name that will be already used by somebody else. My DevOps codes S3 bucket. Hopefully nobody used this one. We can also add a tag to the resource. So we can have it name my bucket, environment dev. We can leave it for now. All right. So let's save this. Yes. And Terraform will show us the changes from our code if we type Terraform plan. And this is something that I want to show you. As you already observed before, we have to configure AWS access keys, right? Because Terraform has to know with which account on AWS he has to interact. So here we can see that there are no valid credentials. So what we can do, you can go to your AWS account, you can go to IAM service. You can find your user, and we have to check if you have generated access keys. Security credentials. And you can see that I have some access key here. I don't remember where I'm storing it, so I just want to show you that we can create an access keys here. Access key ID. Let's copy it. In your machine locally, you might have to install AWS CLI. So just want to show you. There will be also documentation in AWS how to install or update the AWS CLI. I would recommend you to go for the CLI version 2, which is the latest one, and you have also installation requirements and instructions on Windows, MacBook, and Linux, 3 most popular. So please follow it and install CLI for yourself. If you have any problems, you can also post a comment under the video, reach out to me, I will help you, of course. But I have already installed because this is Amazon Linux machine and they have it already pre-installed. Okay, so when you have AWS version working, we can make AWS configure and they will ask us to paste the key ID. Now I will take the secret. Don't show your secret to anybody. For the purpose of this video, I will not mark it because I'm gonna delete it in the end of the video. So it's not a problem for me. We have to use the default region, use intro one, and default output, it can be JSON for now, it's okay. All right, so after configuring the AWS CLI, we can use AWS to check AWS S3LS and we see there's nothing. So let's go back to Terraform. And now we can see that Terraform is performing a plan and it will perform following actions. The green one is always pointing that something will be created. So it will create a bucket. Many things they will know after apply because before creating right now, Terraform is not aware of some things, but you can see the bucket that we defined in the file will be my DevOps S3 bucket. Force destroy, it's false. And the tags that we defined also, they are here. And other things like website domain endpoint, they are not known yet because we haven't defined it. So let's create it. Terraform apply. So what apply will do? Apply will always perform a plan as well by default to show us, but we will have this question, right? Do you want to perform these actions? So it's kind of a security before applying the changes, just like it's a good practice. I always do Terraform plan just because to do not type automatically yes and enter. But when I want to do the changes, then I go Terraform apply. I always take a look into the plan, what's gonna happen here. So let's enter yes. And you see that bucket is creating. Okay, apply completed. The bucket has been created. And let's go to S3 and I will check it in both ways. So we can check it in AWS Web Console in the browser and you can see that the bucket has been created. It's August 4th. That's good. And if we go to the terminal, we can also type again AWS S3LS and we see that the bucket has been created. And in EU Central in Germany, it's night there. Okay. That's good. So we have created bucket, but we can also now configure it a little bit more, right? So there are different configurations and we can see for the bucket website configuration can be configured as a standalone resource. So let's see here, static website hosting, the parameter website is deprecated. So before we have been configuring all inside the S3 bucket. Now we don't do this. We can scroll here and we will create a new resource, AWS S3 bucket website configuration example. It's okay. And we're gonna go through the example. All right, let's copy this. Let's go back to our code. We can go back to S3TF. All right, so we have one resource. We can paste below our website configuration. You can change this example to also, and you can observe if we put my bucket here, the same like in the line number 1, it's okay because this ID will refer to this resource, right? So we can have it the same, but we cannot have two resources with the same ID, two same resources. So now we have to point to the bucket, and this is something that I showed you before in the bottom of S3 bucket. Let's go back there quickly to make you easier to understand. So if we go down and we will see this attribute, so this is something that is going out of the bucket. And when we are configuring website configuration, so here we could hard code a string, like we could hard code the name of our bucket, but this is not a good practice because what if we want to reuse this code somewhere else? So instead of hard coding, we can refer to the resource that we have created. So instead of having here example, we can have my bucket, right? So this is our parameter and this is the value, and the value will be taken from the AWS S3 bucket, which is here, dot my bucket, because we are pointing to this bucket, and this bucket has this output, and this should work, and we're gonna check it in a while, right? It's very important to understand that instead of putting my DevOps codes bucket here, right, we want to refer dynamically. It's a very good way to write the code. For the index, we're gonna leave index HTML. We don't have error, so let's leave it index. Routing rule, we don't want to have any routings because we don't have any website. You can, in Nano, you can use Control K. It will delete the whole lines. Be careful how many lines you are deleting. In our case, we want to leave this bracket here. Okay, Control X. Let's close it. Yes. All right. Terraform plan. Okay, and we see that we will create a new resource, Terraform resource, website configuration, and you can see that Terraform rewrite this reference into the name of the bucket, right? So Terraform will take care of it and will put a string, the name of our bucket here, instead of the reference that we write. That's a very useful thing. Okay, enter value yes. You can wait until it's done, it's added. And now we can see the properties of our S3 bucket, and we see that the static website hosting is evaluated. But of course, it's still private. So what we would have to do here, we would have to change block all public off. Okay, so we are not, but there's still missing bucket policy, as you might remember from the last lesson. So we can check it if we have here AWS S3 bucket policy. So we have an example here of bucket policy. So we have to also refer to the bucket. Here they are referring to ID, then the policy, and the policy might be as a JSON. So let's copy this. Let's go back to our instance, go back to s3.df. Let's paste it. So we can change it. Let's leave it allow access. We have my bucket. Let's also change it here, allow access. Here also we'll leave allow access because it's the same way how we refer between S3 bucket and another resources. So the policy will be referring to data. Data is here. AWS IAM policy resource. This is here. And we have to use this ID, right? And the JSON of this policy will have a JSON. All right. So what we want to do here, I'm not sure if we have, let's go and find AWS S3 bucket website policy, setting permissions for website access. I just want to show you that how do I find information, right? Because I don't want to go through, let's say, prepared scenario, because we are always going and check. Okay, we have principal everything, and as I remember, we will have to put here everything. I'm not sure if also here, but we're gonna check it in a while because the Terraform will print us some errors if it will not work, right? So we want to have action s3 get object, and the resource we need to have our bucket name. So let's see, and you can see that we can have, it's very important when we are granting access to S3 objects that at the end of our ARN we have to put this \wildcard to allow this action on all of the files. So we can delete this ARN, and you can see again, instead of making ARN, we can have this string, and inside the string, if we put dollar and curly brackets, Terraform will refer to the resource, right? It will make this these letters, right, interactive instead of having them as a strings, and we can have this / and a wildcard here. But to ensure, let's see, IAM policy. If we have it here or not, I remember it was somewhere in the past in the documentation about the principles. You can also look for Terraform, AWS policy, principles. And we can see AWS IAM policy document. Let's go lower. Resources, wildcard. What we want to find? We want to find for all principles. How does it look? Principles. So they are AWS, federated, principles configuration block. Let's go below. Here we have principles, and there's the node that I was looking for. Even to the IAM documentation states principle is all and principal AWS all are equivalent. Those principal elements have different behavior in some situations. Okay, to have Terraform render JSON containing principal AWS everything, use. Okay, to have Terraform render JSON containing principal everything, use type everything and identifiers everything. Okay. So we have two values here, type and identifiers. So let's go back. So this is what we wanted, probably. Type all, identifiers all. Let's just ensure this is a string, and this should be a list, and inside list there's a string. Okay, let's close this, Control X, Y, enter. We can also do Terraform fmt. This will format our files, it make it more nice. And we can also do Terraform validate. It's faster than plan, and it's also making some checks against our code. And we see there is a success. It's not like 100% that if it's validated, it will work, but it can help us to find some syntax errors before we start planning or applying. And now I go to with apply. Okay, we see that there's one resource to be added. Principal is on, no sit. The bucket, you see, the name of the bucket has been rendered here. Okay, it was changed. Let's see if we, yeah, that's changing now, right? Because when we refresh, there's no more 403 forbidden, it's 404 not found. The bucket should appear, the policy should appear here. Yes, it is, that's great. So now let's upload the file. And we have this index.html, the same one from the last lesson. Let's upload it. Let's refresh, and we see that we have our website running, right? Congratulations, we have configured S3 bucket with Terraform. We're gonna continue that lesson in next episode, so you don't have to delete it. However, you can do Terraform destroy, and Terraform will delete everything. So yes, of course we can do that. So I will show you how quickly now we can delete, and most likely that destroy will fail, and I will show you why. Because we have a file and we see that the force destroy is false, right? So let's make it quickly just before we finish. And you can see, yes, deleting S3 bucket is not empty. That's the same thing that we met while deleting the bucket manually in the last lesson. But if we go nano S3 and we can add here, I guess it's force destroy equal true. And now we have to do Terraform apply. If we continue with destroy, Terraform will not see that, it will not set it up on the bucket. So, all right, yeah, we will recreate the policy and the website configuration, and we're gonna change the force destroy. You can see here it will change from false to true. Okay, that was changed. And now when we go again with destroy, that should delete all of our resources. Yes, exactly. 3 will be destroyed, and we should have success here. Exactly. Destroy complete, resources 3, resources deleted. If we go to buckets, we will see there's no bucket here. Let's refresh. No buckets. AWS S3LS from CLI, also no buckets. That's great. So if you are using an EC2 instance, you can stop it, or you can, yeah, I think it's a good way to stop it and then come back to it in the next lesson. If you're using your local computer, just leave the folder how it is with all these files, because we're gonna continue from here in the next lesson. Thank you. Leave a comment if you have anything to say about maybe something to improve. What would you like to learn about with Terraform in AWS? Don't forget to subscribe, like the video. That was Paweł from DevOps Codes Academy, and see you in the next lesson about AWS and Terraform.